The wind howled through the dusty streets of Black Hawk, Colorado, as Olivia Sanders clutched her 6-month-old baby closer to her chest. Whispers followed her like shadows as she hurried down the boardwalk, the weight of judgment heavier than the basket of supplies she carried in her other arm. It was 1876, and in this mining town nestled in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, a woman with a child and no husband might as well have worn a scarlet letter. "Keep walking, Emmett," Olivia whispered to her son, who gurgled happily, unaware of the stares that pierced his mother's back. "We will be home soon." Olivia had once been the schoolteacher in Black Hawk, respected and admired for her intelligence and gentle manner. Now, she was the subject of gossip and scorn. The school board had dismissed her when her pregnancy became impossible to hide, and no explanation she offered could soften their judgment. She had refused to name the father, a traveling salesman who had promised marriage before disappearing, leaving her with nothing but heartache and a child growing in her womb. "Mrs. Peterson, good afternoon," Olivia said politely as she passed the general store owner's wife, who merely pursed her lips and turned away. It had been like this for months. Only the widow Johnson, who ran the small boarding house where Olivia rented a room, showed her any kindness, occasionally watching Emmett while Olivia took in laundry and mending to earn enough for them to survive. As she approached the crossroads, the sound of hooves thundered in the distance. A group of cowboys rode into town, dust billowing around them as they headed toward the saloon. Olivia quickened her pace, keeping her eyes down. Cowboys meant trouble for a woman alone. Miss, wait," a deep voice called out. Olivia ignored it, clutching Emmett tighter as she hurried toward the boarding house. "Miss, you dropped something," the voice persisted. Reluctantly, she turned to see a tall cowboy holding up her handkerchief. He was not like the others who had just ridden, and his clothes were dusty but neat, his face clean-shaven beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His eyes, the color of a summer sky, met hers with a directness that made her breath catch. "Thank you," she said stiffly, reaching for the handkerchief. "Yates Lawson," he said, introducing himself as he handed it back. "Just arrived in town, looking for work at the Peterson Ranch." "I wish you luck, Mr. Lawson," Olivia replied, attempting to end the conversation. Baby Emmett chose that moment to let out a delighted squeal, reaching his tiny hand toward the stranger's hat. The cowboy smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "And who might this little fella be?" he asked, tipping his hat at the baby. "My son, Emmett," Olivia answered, waiting for the familiar cloud of judgment to darken his face. Instead, his smile widened. "Well, pleased to meet you too, Emmett," he said, offering his finger, which the baby grasped with surprising strength. "Got a good grip there. You'll make a fine cowhand someday." Something in his easy manner, the way he spoke to her son as if it were the most natural thing in the world, made Olivia's guardedness falter for just a moment. "We must be going," she said, adjusting her basket. "Good day, Mr. Lawson." "Good day, miss." He waited for her to supply her name. "Sanders. Olivia Sanders," he nodded, touching the brim of his hat. "Hope to see you again, Miss Sanders, and you too, young Emmett." As Olivia walked away, she could feel his eyes on her back, but for the first time in months it didn't feel like judgment. The boarding house was quiet when she arrived, most residents out working or socializing. Mrs. Johnson was in the kitchen, kneading dough with her strong hands. "There you are, Olivia," the older woman said, wiping flour on her apron. "How was town?" "The same," Olivia replied, setting down her basket and bouncing Emmett, who was beginning to fuss. "Though there are new cowboys in town." Mrs. Johnson raised an eyebrow. "Trouble? No, at least not all of them." She thought of Yates Lawson's kind eyes. "One seemed decent." The widow smiled. Well, there's always one good apple in every bunch. Now let me hold that sweet boy while you put your things away." Later that evening, as Emmett slept in his makeshift crib, Olivia sat by the window, mending a torn shirt. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a rocking chair, and a chest for their meager belongings. It wasn't much, but it was all she could afford now. Her thoughts drifted to Yates Lawson. There had been something different about him, a genuineness in his manner that contrasted sharply with the coldness she'd grown accustomed to. But she knew better than to dwell on such thoughts. Men, in her experience, could not be trusted, especially with matters of the heart. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Olivia wrapped Emmett in a shawl and set out for the Wilsons' farm on the edge of town. Mrs. Wilson had hired her to help with laundry on Tuesdays, one of the few jobs she could manage while caring for Emmett. As she walked along the dusty road, a rider approached from behind. Her heart quickened when she recognized Yates Lawson, mounted on a chestnut gelding. "Miss Sanders," he called, slowing his horse to match her pace. "Heading out of town?" "To the Wilson farm," she replied, keeping her eyes forward. "That's on my way. Would you like a ride? It's a fair distance, especially with a little one." Olivia hesitated. She hadn't ridden with anyone since before Emmett. But the farm was 3 miles away and her arms were already aching from carrying him. "I wouldn't want to trouble you," she said. "No trouble at all." He dismounted and approached carefully, as if she were a skittish colt. "I promise you'll be safe." Something in his earnest expression made her believe him. "All right, thank you." With surprising gentleness, he helped her up, ensuring Emmett was secure in her arms before mounting behind her. The closeness made her tense, but he maintained a respectful distance as much as possible on horseback. "Got work at the Wilsons?" he asked as they rode. "Laundry," she replied. "Mrs. Wilson has rheumatism in her hands. And what did you do before?" He left the question hanging delicately. Olivia stiffened. "I was the school teacher." "Ah, that explains it." "Explains what?" "Why you speak so proper-like, more educated than most around here." She couldn't help a small smile. "Yes, well, education wasn't enough to save my reputation." The words slipped out before she could stop them. She hadn't meant to be so forthright, but something about this stranger made her guard lower. Yates was quiet for a moment. "Folks can be mighty quick to judge what they don't understand," he finally said, his voice soft against her ear. "Especially in small towns." "Have you lived in many small towns, Mr. Lawson?" "More than I can count. Never stayed in one place long enough to call it home." "And what brings you to Black Hawk?" "Heard they needed hands at Peterson's ranch. Winter's coming, and I figured it's time to settle somewhere for a spell." They crested a hill, and the Wilson farm came into view, a modest homestead with a barn, a vegetable garden, and a clothesline where sheets flapped in the breeze. "Here we are," Yates said, reining in his horse and dismounting before helping her down. "Thank you for the ride," Olivia said, adjusting Emmett in her arms. "My pleasure." "Would you like me to come back for you later, say around 4? She should have refused. It was too familiar, too trusting. But the thought of walking all the way back to town with Emmett and her tired arms made the decision for her. "That would be very kind," she said, "if it's truly not out of your way." "Not at all." He tipped his hat. 4 o'clock then." As he rode away, Mrs. Wilson appeared at the door, her eyebrows raised in surprise. "Who was that handsome cowboy?" "Just someone new in town," Olivia replied, trying to sound casual. "He offered me a ride." Mrs. Wilson's eyes sparkled with interest. "First man I've seen you talk to in months." "And he's coming back, you say?" "Only to save me the walk back to town," Olivia insisted, but she couldn't help the warmth that crept into her cheeks. The day passed quickly as Olivia washed, wrung, and hung the Wilsons' laundry. Between tasks, She nursed Emmett and played with him on a blanket in the shade. Unlike many in town, the Wilsons had been kind to her after her dismissal from the school, offering her work and treating Emmett with affection. "That boy's growing like a weed," Mr. Wilson commented as he passed by with an armload of firewood. "Strong, too, by the look of him." "Yes," Olivia agreed, watching Emmett bat at a wooden rattle. "He's a blessing." "A child always is," Mrs. Wilson said, joining them. "No matter the circumstances." The words were a balm to Olivia's heart, so accustomed to judgment. At precisely 4 o'clock, the sound of hoofbeats announced Yates's return. Emmett was dozing against Olivia's shoulder as she gathered her things and said goodbye to the Wilsons. "Your cowboy's prompt," Mrs. Wilson whispered with a wink. "That's a good sign." "He's not my cowboy," Olivia protested, but the older woman just smiled knowingly. Yates dismounted when he saw her, his face breaking into a warm smile that made something flutter in Olivia's chest. "How was your day?" he asked, taking her bundle as naturally as if they'd known each other for years. "Productive," she replied. "And yours?" "Got the job at Peterson's, starting tomorrow." He glanced at the sleeping baby. "Looks like someone's tuckered out." "He's had a busy day of rolling over and trying to put everything in his mouth," Olivia said with a soft laugh. The ride back to town was more relaxed than the morning journey. Yates told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about the war that had taken his father, about drifting westward after his mother remarried. He spoke without pretense or guile, and Olivia found herself sharing more than she intended about her own childhood in Boston, her father's death that had left them destitute, her mother sending her west to teach in a town that needed educated women, and the baby's father. Yates asked tentatively as they neared Black Hawk. Olivia tensed. "Not in the picture," she said tersely. He didn't press further, and she was grateful for his discretion. As they rode into town, heads turned to watch them. Olivia could almost hear the whispers starting. The fallen schoolteacher riding with a handsome cowboy, the scandal of it all. But for once, she didn't care. Let them talk. They would anyway. "Thank you again," she said as he helped her down in front of the boarding house. "My pleasure, Miss Sanders." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be staying at the Peterson bunkhouse, but I come into town on Saturdays. Perhaps I could call on you. Properly, I mean." The request caught her off guard. No man had called on her since her arrival in Black Hawk 3 years ago. "Certainly none since Emmett. Mr. Lawson, I understand if you'd rather not," he said quickly. "Just thought I'd ask." Emmett chose that moment to wake, blinking up at Yates with curious eyes. "See. The little fella wants me to come visit," Yates said with a grin, offering his finger to the baby who grabbed it immediately. Olivia couldn't help but laugh. "It seems I'm outvoted. Saturday afternoon would be fine, Mr. Lawson." His smile widened. "Yates, please." "Yates," she repeated, testing the name. "Until Saturday, then." As she watched him ride away, Mrs. Johnson appeared in the doorway behind her. "Well, well," the landlady said with a knowing smile, "that must be the decent cowboy you mentioned." "He was kind enough to give me a ride to the Wilsons and back," Olivia explained, trying to sound nonchalant. "And kind enough to make you smile for the first time in months," Mrs. Johnson observed. "I like him already." Over the next few days, Olivia tried to push thoughts of Yates Lawson from her mind. She had no business entertaining romantic notions, not with Emmett to care for and her precarious position in the community. Yet she found herself watching the clock as Saturday approached, wondering if he would truly come. Saturday morning, Olivia woke early, an unfamiliar nervousness fluttering in her stomach. She dressed with more care than usual, choosing her blue dress faded but still presentable and pinning her dark blonde hair in a simple but flattering style. Mrs. Johnson noticed her efforts and offered to watch Emmett for a while if she wanted to show that cowboy around town. "It's not like that," Olivia insisted, though her blush betrayed her. "Of course not, dear," Mrs. Johnson replied with a knowing smile. At precisely 2 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Olivia smoothed her dress, took a deep breath, and opened it to find Yates standing there, hat in hand. He'd clearly made an effort too. His clothes were clean, his hair neatly combed, and he'd brought a small bunch of wildflowers. "Afternoon, Miss Sanders," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "These are for you." "Thank you," she replied, accepting the flowers with genuine pleasure. "They're lovely. Won't you come in?" The boarding-house parlor was modest but comfortable. Mrs. Johnson had discreetly made herself scarce, though Olivia knew she wouldn't be far, keeping an ear open for Emmett, who was napping. "How is life at the Peterson ranch?" Olivia asked as they sat on the sofa, a proper distance between them. "Good, honest work," Yates replied. "Mr. Peterson runs a fair operation, and you, how have your days been?" "The usual. Laundry, mending, taking care of Emmett. He seems like a fine boy." "He is," Olivia said, her face softening. "The best thing that ever happened to me, despite everything." Yates nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes the greatest blessings come from the hardest circumstances. Before she could respond, Emmett's cry echoed from the next room. Olivia rose immediately. "Excuse me, he's woken from his nap." She returned moments later with Emmett in her arms, his face still flushed from sleep. "There he is," Yates said, his face lighting up. "Hello, young man." To Olivia's surprise, Emmett stopped fussing and stared at Yates with wide eyes before breaking into a toothless grin. "He remembers you," she said, amazed. "May I?" Yates asked, holding out his arms. Hesitantly, Olivia handed Emmett over, watching carefully. Yates held him with unexpected confidence, settling the baby comfortably in the crook of his arm. "I have 5 younger siblings," he explained, noticing her surprise. "Helped raise most of them while Ma worked after Pa died." Emmett seemed perfectly content in Yates's arms, reaching up to pat his clean-shaven face with curious hands. "Would you like to take a walk?" Olivia suggested, suddenly wanting to be outside, away from prying ears. "It's a lovely afternoon." "I'd like that very much," Yates replied. They strolled through town, Yates still carrying Emmett, who had dozed off against his chest. Olivia was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them, but Yates seemed oblivious, or perhaps he simply didn't care. "People are talking," she murmured as they passed a group of women who abruptly stopped conversing to watch them. "Let them," Yates replied easily. "What harm can words do?" "You'd be surprised," Olivia said softly, thinking of the cutting remarks, the doors closed in her face, the children forbidden to play with Emmett when he was older. Yates gave her a sidelong glance. "It's been hard for you here." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes." "When they discovered I was with child and unmarried, everything changed. The school board dismissed me, calling me morally unfit to teach their children. Former friends crossed the street to avoid speaking to me. Only a few, like Mrs. Johnson and the Wilsons, showed any kindness. And the father. He just left." Olivia's face hardened slightly. "Thomas was a traveling salesman. He stayed in town for a month, courted me, promised marriage, then moved on to the next town. By the time I realized I was expecting, he was long gone." "I'm sorry," Yates said, genuine regret in his voice. No man worth his salt would do such a thing. They had reached the edge of town, where a small creek meandered beneath cottonwood trees. Olivia led him to a fallen log where they could sit and watch the water. "What about you?" she asked, wanting to change the subject. "What brought you west after the war?" Yates adjusted the sleeping Emmett in his arms. "Restlessness, mostly." After Pa died in the war, Ma struggled. When she remarried, her new husband wasn't keen on having a grown son around, so I drifted, worked cattle drives, ranch jobs, whatever I could find. But lately, she prompted when he fell silent. Lately, I've been thinking it might be nice to stay put somewhere, build something lasting. His blue eyes met hers. Find someone to build it with. Olivia's heart quickened, but she forced herself to be practical. You've known me less than a week, Mr. Lawson. Yates, he corrected gently. And yes, it hasn't been long, but sometimes you just know when something feels right. I thought I knew once before, she reminded him, glancing at Emmett. I was wrong. Fair enough, he conceded. Then let's take our time. Get to know each other proper. No rush, no pressure. Just two people finding out if they might suit. His reasonableness was refreshing after Thomas's flowery promises and hasty assurances. Olivia found herself nodding. I think I'd like that, she said softly. Emmett stirred, making small noises of discontent that signaled hunger. We should head back, Olivia said, standing. He'll need feeding soon. They walked back to the boarding house, conversing easily about inconsequential things: the weather, the upcoming harvest festival, the new shipment of books the general store had ordered at Olivia's request. At the boarding house steps, Yates carefully handed Emmett back to her. Thank you for the afternoon, Miss Sanders. I enjoyed it immensely. As did I, she admitted, and please call me Olivia. His smile warmed his entire face. Olivia, then. Would it be all right if I called again next Saturday? Yes, she replied without hesitation. I'd like that. He tipped his hat and turned to go, then paused. I almost forgot. Mrs. Peterson mentioned needing help with household accounts. She's been ill and the books have fallen behind. I told her I knew a former school teacher who might be able to help. Would you be interested? The pay's fair, and she said you could bring the little one. Hope flared in Olivia's chest. Proper work beyond laundry and mending was exactly what she needed. Yes, I would be very interested. Thank you for thinking of me. My pleasure. I'll let her know, and she'll send word about when to come out to the ranch. As she watched him walk away, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: possibility. The future, which had seemed so bleak and confined, suddenly held promise. That evening, as she rocked Emmett to sleep, she allowed herself to dream a little. Not grand fantasies of instant love and rescue, but small, practical hopes: regular work, a friend who didn't judge her, perhaps in time, something more. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. What do you think, little one? She whispered to her sleeping son. Could we trust him? Could he be different? Emmett sighed in his sleep, his tiny hand curled around her finger. The next day brought a note from Mrs. Peterson, requesting Olivia's help with the ranch accounts twice weekly, Mondays and Thursdays, at a wage that made her eyes widen. It was more than fair, it was generous. The note mentioned that one of the ranch hands would fetch her on Monday morning, and she was welcome to bring her little boy. Olivia showed the note to Mrs. Johnson, who beamed. See, things are looking up already, and I wonder which ranch hand will be coming to get you. The older woman's eyes twinkled knowingly. It's just work, Olivia insisted, though she couldn't help but wonder herself. Monday morning dawned clear and crisp, with the promise of autumn in the air. Olivia dressed herself and Emmett carefully, packed a small bag with his necessities, and was ready when hoofbeats sounded outside. To her surprise, and if she was honest, slight disappointment, it wasn't Yates but an older cowboy named Frank who had come to escort her. Mr. Lawson's busy with the north pasture herd today, madam, Frank explained as he helped her into the wagon. Asked me to make sure you got to the ranch safe and sound. The Peterson ranch was larger than Olivia had expected: a handsome two-story house, a large barn, bunkhouses for the hands, corrals, and outbuildings spread across a valley with mountains rising behind them. Mrs. Peterson, a plump, pleasant woman with graying hair, welcomed Olivia warmly. "So you're the teacher Mr. Lawson spoke so highly of," she said, ushering Olivia into a comfortable study. "He said you're good with figures, and heaven knows I need help with these books. Ever since my illness, I can't seem to make sense of them, and Mr. Peterson is hopeless with anything involving numbers." "I'm happy to help," Olivia replied, settling Emmett on a blanket near her feet with a wooden toy Yates had carved for him. Mrs. Peterson's eyes softened at the sight of the baby. "What a beautiful child. May I hold him later? Our children are grown and gone, and I miss having little ones around." The casual acceptance, so different from the judgment Olivia usually faced, brought tears to her eyes. "Of course," she managed to say. The morning passed quickly as Olivia organized months of receipts, sales records, and expense accounts. Mrs. Peterson brought coffee and biscuits, cooed over Emmett, and generally made Olivia feel more welcome than she had anywhere in months. Around midday, the sound of horses and men's voices drifted through the open window. Olivia's heart skipped when she recognized Yates's laugh among them. "That'll be the men coming in for dinner," Mrs. Peterson said. "You'll join us, of course." Before Olivia could protest that she hadn't expected to stay for the meal, the door opened and Yates appeared, hat in hand, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Miss Sanders," he said, then corrected himself with a glance at Mrs. Peterson. "Olivia. Frank said he brought you out this morning. How are you finding the accounts?" "In need of attention, but nothing that can't be fixed," she replied, smiling despite herself. Mrs. Peterson looked between them with interest. "Well, Mr. Lawson, since you two are already acquainted, perhaps you'd escort Olivia to the dining room. I need to check on dinner." The older woman bustled out, leaving them alone save for Emmett, who was napping on his blanket. "She seems to like you," Yates observed, nodding toward the door Mrs. Peterson had exited through. "She's been very kind," Olivia agreed, gathering Emmett carefully into her arms. "So have you, arranging this work for me." "It wasn't charity," he assured her. "Mrs. Peterson genuinely needed help and you genuinely needed work. I just made the connection." As they walked to the dining room, Olivia was conscious of his presence beside her, solid, reassuring, different from any man she'd known before. In the dining room, the other ranch hands were already gathered, and Olivia braced herself for the usual judgment. Instead, they nodded respectfully, several tipping their hats, one older man even offering to hold Emmett while she ate. "That's Jackson," Yates whispered as she hesitated. "Raised 6 kids of his own, knows his way around babies." Dinner was a lively affair with conversation flowing easily. Olivia found herself laughing at the Cowboy's stories, contributing to discussions about books and current events, feeling for the first time in ages like a normal person rather than a pariah. After the meal, Mrs. Peterson insisted Olivia rest before tackling more accounts, showing her to a comfortable bedroom where Emmett could nap properly. When she emerged an hour later, she found Yates waiting in the hallway. "Mrs. Peterson asked me to show you the garden," he said. "She's quite proud of it." The garden was indeed impressive, with late summer flowers still blooming and vegetables ripening in neat rows. They walked slowly along the paths, Emmett awake now and looking around with interest from Olivia's arms. "I spoke with Mr. Peterson about something," Yates said after a comfortable silence. "The old Miller cabin, about a half-mile from the main house. It's been empty since the Millers moved to Denver last spring. He's willing to let it for a fair price, with some work thrown in." Olivia looked at him questioningly. "I was thinking," he continued, "that with your work here twice a week, and the cabin being so much closer than town, It might be a good arrangement for you and Emmett. More space than the boarding house room, a bit of land for a garden. And he added softly, farther from the judgmental eyes in town. The offer was tempting more than tempting, a place of her own, away from the whispers, with steady work nearby. "Why are you doing this, Yates?" she asked directly. "You hardly know me." He considered her question seriously. "Because I've been judged too in my time. For being poor, for drifting, for not fighting in a war that took my pa. Because I see something in you, strength, kindness, dignity despite everything. And because," he added with a gentle smile at Emmett, "this little fella deserves a fair chance without the weight of other folks' opinions holding him down." His honesty touched something deep inside her. "I'd like to see this cabin," she said at last. The Miller cabin was small but solidly built, with 2 rooms, a sturdy roof, and a porch facing west toward the mountains. It needed cleaning and some repairs, but Olivia could immediately see its potential. "Mr. Peterson says you can move in next week if you want it," Yates told her as she walked around the space, imagining where her few belongings would go. "I've offered to help fix it up in my spare time." "Why would you do that?" she asked, genuinely curious. He met her eyes steadily. "Because I'd like to court you properly, Olivia Sanders, without the town gossips watching our every move, if you'll allow it." Her heart raced at his directness. "Yates, I have a child, an illegitimate child. People will talk no matter where we are." "Let them," he said simply. "I don't care what people say. I care about what's true. And what's true is that I've never met a woman like you, and I'd like the chance to know you better. Both of you," he added, touching Emmett's cheek gently. Olivia took a deep breath. "Then yes, I'll take the cabin, and yes, you may court me." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Olivia gave notice at the boarding house, packed her meager belongings, and with Mrs. Johnson's blessing, prepared to move to the Peterson ranch. The older woman hugged her tightly the day she left. "You follow your heart, girl," she whispered. "That cowboy looks at you the way a man should look at a woman like you hang the moon and stars." Yates had been true to his word, spending every spare moment working on the cabin, fixing the roof, repairing windows, building a proper crib for Emmett from scrap lumber. Other ranch hands pitched in too, seemingly accepting Olivia and her situation without the judgment she'd grown accustomed to in town. Moving day arrived on a crisp October morning. Yates drove the wagon himself, loaded with Olivia's trunk, a rocking chair Mrs. Johnson had insisted she take, and supplies Mrs. Peterson had contributed: linens, kitchen items, jars of preserved fruits and vegetables. "It's not much," Olivia said worriedly as they arranged her belongings in the cabin. "It's a start," Yates replied confidently. "A home is built over time, with care and attention, just like anything worth having." She understood he wasn't just talking about the cabin. Life at the ranch settled into a pleasant routine. Olivia worked on the accounts Mondays and Thursdays, took in mending from the ranch hands, and began helping Mrs. Peterson with correspondence and household management. The extra income allowed her to slowly add comforts to the cabin: a better stove, a soft rug for the floor, curtains for the windows. Yates courted her with patient determination. He came for supper 3 times a week, always bringing something: wildflowers, a book he thought she'd enjoy, a toy he'd carved for Emmett. On Sundays, he took them riding in the wagon, showing Olivia beautiful spots in the surrounding countryside that she would never have discovered on her own. As autumn deepened toward winter, so did their relationship. Olivia found herself looking forward to his visits, missing him when ranch work kept him away for days, thinking of things to tell him when he returned. Emmett, now crawling and babbling, clearly adored him, lighting up whenever Yates entered the cabin. One evening in late November, as the first snow dusted the ground outside, they sat before the fire after Emmett had been tucked into his crib. Yates had been unusually quiet during supper, and Olivia sensed something was on his mind. "Is everything all right?" she asked, setting aside her mending. He looked at her, firelight playing across his handsome features. "I've been offered a job," he said. "A good one. Foreman at a ranch near Denver, more money, more responsibility." Olivia's heart sank. "When would you leave?" "That depends," he replied, moving from his chair to kneel before her. "On whether I go alone or not." Her breath caught as he took her hands in his. "Olivia Sanders, I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you protect Emmett, the way you've rebuilt your life despite everything. I love watching you read by lamplight, the way you hum when you cook, how you stand up straight and proud even when people whisper behind your back." Tears filled her eyes as he continued. "I love Emmett too, as if he were my own. I want to be a father to him, to teach him to ride and rope and read, to show him how a man should treat others with respect and kindness." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. "I'm asking you to marry me, Olivia, to let me be your husband and Emmett's pa. To start fresh in Denver, where nobody knows our story but us, to be a family if you'll have me." Olivia's hands trembled in his. "Yates, are you sure? Taking on another man's child, marrying a woman with my reputation, I've never been more sure of anything," he interrupted gently. "And reputations are just stories people tell. I know the truth of who you are, and that's all that matters to me." She searched his eyes and found nothing but sincerity and love. "Then yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "It was my mother's," he explained as she admired it. "She sent it when I wrote to her about you and Emmett." "You wrote to your mother about us?" "Of course. Told her I'd found the woman I wanted to spend my life with, and a little boy who needed a father. She's eager to meet you both." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the Peterson ranch house, with Mrs. Peterson fussing over Olivia like a mother and Mr. Peterson standing up as Yates's best man. Mrs. Johnson came from town, along with the Wilsons and a few others who had shown Olivia kindness during her difficult times. Emmett, dressed in a tiny suit Mrs. Peterson had sewn, was held by Mrs. Johnson during the simple ceremony. As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the burden of judgment, of struggling alone, of fearing for Emmett's future. When Yates kissed her, sealing their vows, she knew she had found not just a husband but a true partner. That night, after Emmett was asleep in his crib, Olivia and Yates sat on the porch of their cabin, wrapped in blankets against the winter chill, looking at the stars. "Mrs. Lawson," Yates said softly, testing the name. "How does it sound?" "Perfect," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. "When do we leave for Denver?" "After Christmas," he said. "Mr. Peterson's given us the use of the cabin until then, and I need to finish some work here before we go. That gives us time to pack properly and prepare Emmett for the journey." "Are you nervous?" she asked. "About the new position?" "A little," he admitted, "but mostly I'm excited. For the first time, I'll be working not just for myself but for my family." The word warmed Olivia's heart. "Family," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." The journey to Denver in early January was challenging but manageable. They traveled in a covered wagon filled with their belongings, Emmett bundled against the cold, stopping at farms and small settlements along the way. Yates was a careful traveler, never pushing too hard, always ensuring Olivia and Emmett were comfortable before tending to himself or the horses. Denver was a revelation after Black Hawk, larger, busier. more anonymous. The ranch where Yates would be foreman lay 10 miles outside the city, a sprawling operation owned by a wealthy businessman who rarely visited, preferring to leave management to trusted employees. Their new home was a substantial cabin near the main ranch house, with 3 rooms, a real kitchen, and a small stable attached. The owner's wife, Mrs. Calloway, welcomed them warmly, cooing over Emmett and offering Olivia friendship rather than judgment. "My Thomas told me you were educated, Mrs. Calloway said during their first meeting. "Perhaps you might help with the ranch accounts as you did at the Petersons. We would pay you, of course." Once again, Olivia found herself with meaningful work, a comfortable home, and most importantly, a husband who loved her and Emmett unreservedly. Yates took to his new role with natural authority, earning the respect of the ranch hands and the appreciation of the absentee owner. Spring came to Colorado, turning the landscapes green and filling the air with the scent of wildflowers. On Emmett's first birthday, Yates surprised them both by coming home with a tiny pony. "He's too young to ride yet," he explained as Olivia looked at him in amazement. "But the pony's gentle and will grow with him. Every boy should have a pony to care for." As Emmett, now toddling confidently, patted the pony's nose under Yates's careful supervision, Olivia felt a surge of gratitude for this man who had transformed their lives with his love and acceptance. That night, after Emmett was asleep, she shared news of her own. "Yates," she said softly as they sat together on the porch, a habit they'd maintained from their courtship days. "I visited the doctor in town yesterday." He turned to her, concern immediately flooding his face. "Are you ill?" "No," she replied, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. "I'm with our child, due in November." The joy that suffused his features was something she would remember all her days. He gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." "You're already such a wonderful father to Emmett," she said. "This child is fortunate to have you from the beginning." "And Emmett is fortunate to have you as his mother," Yates replied. "He'll never know the difference in how I love them both, my children, regardless of blood." As summer progressed, Olivia's pregnancy became visible. Unlike her first pregnancy, which had been marked by shame and secrecy, this one was celebrated openly. Mrs. Calloway organized a gathering of neighboring women who brought gifts and advice. Yates proudly told everyone at the ranch, receiving congratulations and good-natured teasing. Emmett thrived in the loving environment, growing into a sturdy, curious toddler who followed Yates like a shadow whenever he was home. Yates taught him to feed the chickens, to pet the horses gently, to say please and thank you, all with a patience and tenderness that made Olivia love him more each day. In late November, just as the first snow fell, Olivia gave birth to a son they named James, after Yates's father. Emmett, not quite 2, peered at his brother with solemn curiosity, then declared baby. With such authority that even the midwife laughed, life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. Yates proved as adept with a newborn as he was with a toddler, getting up at night to bring James to Olivia for feeding, then rocking him back to sleep so she could rest. He made no distinction between the boys, loving them both with equal devotion. As the years passed, their family grew. A daughter, Elizabeth, joined them 2 years after James, followed by another son, William, 3 years later. The cabin expanded too, with Yates adding rooms as their family increased. Emmett grew into a thoughtful, responsible boy who excelled at school and showed a natural affinity for horses, like his adoptive father. James was more academic, devouring books from an early age. Elizabeth had her mother's quiet determination, while William inherited Yates's easy charm. On Emmett's 10th birthday, as they celebrated with a family dinner, Yates pulled him aside for a private conversation. Olivia watched through the window as Yates spoke earnestly to the boy, then handed him a small package. Emmett's face grew serious as he opened it, then broke into a wide smile as he threw his arms around Yates's neck. Later, Emmett showed her what Yates had given him, a pocket watch that had belonged to Yates's father, engraved with the words, "To my son Emmett, with love from your pa." "Pa told me about my real father," Emmett said, his young face thoughtful. "How he wasn't ready to be a father, but that it was his loss, not mine. He said being a father isn't about whose blood you have, but about who raises you, loves you, teaches you to be a good man." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. "Your pa is very wise." "I know," Emmett replied with the certainty of a child who has never doubted his place in the world. "I'm lucky he found us, aren't I, Ma?" "We both are," she agreed, hugging him close. That night, as they prepared for bed, Olivia recounted the conversation to Yates. "He asked me once, about a year ago, why his last name changed when he was little," Yates explained, pulling her close. "I told him when his ma and I married, I wanted him to have my name because he was my son in every way that mattered. He seemed satisfied with that, but I figured at 10, he's old enough to know the full story, not the details but the outline." "Thank you," Olivia whispered, resting her head on his chest, "for loving him as your own, for giving him security and confidence, for never making him feel different from James and William." "He's my firstborn in my heart," Yates said simply. "Has been since that first day in Black Hawk when he grabbed my finger with his tiny hand. Life wasn't without challenges, drought years that strained the ranch, illnesses that frightened them, the normal conflicts of family life. But through it all, Yates remained the steady center of their family, the man who had seen past judgment to the woman Olivia truly was, who had embraced a child not his own, who had declared, 'We'll be a family now,' and made it gloriously true. As their children grew, so did the ranch's prosperity. Yates eventually became a partner in the operation, then its manager when Mr. Calloway decided to retire fully. They built a larger house, established themselves in the community, and watched with pride as Emmett, then James, then William followed in Yates's footsteps in the ranching business, while Elizabeth became a teacher like her mother had once been. On their 25th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset, still their favorite evening ritual, Olivia reached for Yates's hand. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't ridden into Black Hawk that day?" she asked. He squeezed her hand, the years having added lines to his face but none to his heart. "No," he said simply, "because I can't imagine any life but this one, with you, with our children, with the family we built together." "Nor can I," she replied, leaning her head on his shoulder, "still a perfect fit after all these years." "You saved us, Yates." "No," he corrected gently. "We saved each other. You gave me a home, a purpose, a family when I was just a drifting cowboy with nothing but a horse and a dream of belonging somewhere." As the last rays of sun gilded the mountains, Olivia reflected on their journey from a shunned young mother and a solitary cowboy to this rich, full life they'd created together. The whispers and judgment of Black Hawk seemed a lifetime ago, replaced by respect, love, and the joy of watching their children grow into good, kind adults. "I love you, Yates Lawson," she said, the words as true now as when she'd first spoken them on their wedding day. "Thank you for being my husband, for being a father to all our children, for the life we've built." "I love you too, Olivia Lawson," he replied, kissing her softly, "and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." As darkness fell and the stars emerged overhead, they remained on the porch, hands clasped. Hearts full, the schoolteacher once shunned for having a child out of wedlock, and the cowboy who had declared, "We'll be a family now," making a promise that had shaped their lives and the lives of their children with love, acceptance, and unwavering commitment. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of their grandchildren playing in the yard of Emmett's nearby house, the next generation of Lawsons, growing up secure in the knowledge of who they were and where they belonged. It was everything Olivia had once feared Emmett would never have, and everything Yates had once yearned for as a drifting young man: a true home, a loving family, a place in the world built on love rather than judgment. "We did good, didn't we?" Yates murmured, his arm around her shoulders. "Yes," Olivia replied, her heart full of gratitude for this man and the life they'd built together. "We did very good indeed."